In 1951, a broke dock worker with 0 degree wrote a book that explained Nazis, Bolsheviks, and religious cults. 70 years later, it explains Reddit witch hunts, Trump rallies, woke mobs, and why your normal coworker now wants half the country in gulags. This is the most dangerous book you've never heard of. The book we're exploring is The True Believer: Thoughts on the Nature of Mass Movements by Eric Hoffer, a work often called the Bible of Mass Movements. Drawing on examples like the French Revolution, Nazism, and Zionism, Hoffer digs into a fascinating question. What happens when a lonely, frustrated loser suddenly melts into a crowd? Why do some people suddenly become fanatically devoted to a cause, often to the point of sacrificing everything for it? Before diving into the details, let me give you a simple image. Imagine someone who feels like a complete failure, alone, stuck, and hopeless. But the moment he enters a group full of people who are just as lost, or even worse off, he suddenly doesn't feel like a failure anymore. If he can rise to become the leader of these losers, that surge of meaning may feel electrifying. And today, with the internet, this dynamic is even stronger. Someone who performs mediocrely at work can, online, stir up emotions among the dissatisfied and suddenly gain thousands of followers. Why do people respond? Hoffer says it usually comes from 2 underlying feelings. 1, a craving for someone to speak on their behalf. 2, a sense of relief from not being the only one who has failed. When some Twitter guy screams, "Your failures aren't your fault, it's the system, bro," millions of frustrated people instantly hit retweet. The True Believer was written in 1951. Along with Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd, it's considered a cornerstone of crowd psychology. But while the crowd argues that individuals lose intelligence when absorbed into a group, Hoffer focuses on something different. Mass movements grow because they attract people with personal dissatisfaction, what he calls the frustrated. And Hoffer believed the true engine behind fanaticism is not stupidity, but the desire to forget oneself. Despite the book's influence, many scholars have criticized Hoffer's views. Some say he overstates the psychological role of fanatics. Some argue he lumps too many things, religions, revolutions, nationalism, into the same category. Written in the early 1950s during the Cold War, some of Hoffer's personal biases show through, but his core insights remain timeless. This bias is understandable when we consider the context. He hated the Nazis, distrusted the Soviet Union, and admired America, sometimes blindly. Even so, his insights remain strikingly relevant. Every era must guard against extremism and collective madness. And Hoffer's book helps us see how easily ordinary individuals can become absorbed into destructive causes. Eric Hoffer himself had a legendary life. He went blind at age 7 and regained his sight at 15. His parents died early. He was entirely self-educated. At 18, he took his father's remaining $300 and moved to Los Angeles. He lived in Skid Row for a decade. He drifted between shelters, worked as a lumberjack, gold prospector, and manual laborer. At 40, he joined a dockworkers union in San Francisco. At 49, he published The True Believer. At 62, he became a senior research fellow at UC Berkeley, but he continued working as a dockworker. This earned him the nickname, the Longshoreman Philosopher. He later wrote more than 10 books, and President Ronald Reagan awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Living among marginalized people gave Hoffer a deep understanding of loneliness, frustration, and the hunger for belonging, insights that became the foundation of the True Believer. We'll break the core ideas of the True Believer into 3 parts. Let's begin. Part 1. What drives people into mass movements? Hoffer starts with a simple statement. The desire for change is the surface motivation. People join extremist movements because they want transformation. But the deeper truth is that these cult-like movements prey on frustrated people, not necessarily the poor. Many assume poverty is the root of revolution, but Hoffer argues otherwise. A frustrated person is not simply poor. Even prosperous individuals can lose confidence in the future. For example, imagine two graduates from elite universities. One becomes a respected, successful professional. The other stagnates in a mediocre job. The second person may feel the system is unfair, even though the difference came from personal factors. This resentment, not poverty, is what fuels extremist movements. Hope matters more than poverty. Hoffer points out that hopelessness is far more painful than poverty. Unemployment is terrifying not only because of financial difficulty, but because it throws life into meaninglessness. People flock to stock markets, religions, nationalism, or extreme political groups for the same reason. These things offer hope. A slim chance, even a delusion, is better than despair. Mass movements are interchangeable. A striking idea in the book is, people are loyal not to a cause, but to the act of devotion itself. If a movement gives them identity, they don't care much about its actual principles. To a starving man, whoever promises bread will be followed. This explains why people sometimes shift from one extreme ideology to another, from communism to fascism, for example. The character type, not the ideology, is what matters. Who becomes a true believer? Hoffer lists 11 types of people who are vulnerable to mass movements. Let's highlight two of the most important groups. 1. The recently ruined middle class. Long-term poverty doesn't necessarily create revolutionaries. Those who have been poor forever may simply want to survive. But the newly impoverished, people who once lived better lives, tend to feel betrayed by an unfair system. They remember comfort and feel robbed. Hoffer argues that newly ruined groups supported the biggest revolutions, like the bankrupted middle class during the rise of Nazism and fascism. The most dangerous person in the world isn't the guy who's been poor his whole life. It's the guy who used to have it all and just lost it. 2. The misfits, the temporarily and permanently frustrated. Hoffer separates misfits into two types. Temporary misfits, people who haven't met their goals yet, but still have hope. Permanent misfits, people convinced they will never succeed due to limitations or circumstances. The first group can be stirred by propaganda, but often returns to normal life once conditions improve. But the second group, those who feel life is irredeemable, are the natural material for fanaticism. They seek identity in the collective because their personal life feels meaningless. A person who believes he has nothing left to lose can endure anything and do anything. Part 2. How mass movements inspire unity and self-sacrifice. Hoffer argues that the primary function of mass movements is to unify followers and inspire sacrifice. Method 1. Stirring passion. Fanatics cannot be reasoned with. They can only be aroused. Their true devotion is not to the cause itself, but to the sense of belonging the cause provides. A great example is the film The Wave, which is based on real events. A high school teacher created a miniature authoritarian movement in just 5 days. Teenagers who felt invisible suddenly felt empowered. One student, Tim, wealthy but lonely, bullied and ignored, finally found meaning and belonging through the group. He burned his luxury items, followed orders blindly, and became increasingly fanatic. For people like Tim, what they follow matters far less than their desperate need to belong. Method 2. Belittle the present, exaggerate the future. To make people willing to sacrifice themselves, you must convince them that the present is worthless and the future is glorious. If someone enjoys stability and hope, They won't risk ruining what they have. But the frustrated, who already dislike their lives, embrace the idea that the world must be cleansed. They enjoy watching others lose what they themselves have already lost. How movements create unity. Hoffer names several tools. Here are two key ones. 1. Hatred. Hatred binds people. When we hate someone, we instinctively seek company. Hitler used anti-Semitism not only to unite Germans, but also to connect Germany with other anti-Semitic countries in Europe. But where does hatred come from? Not from injury, but from our awareness of our own weakness. We hate most when we feel inferior. That's why online tribes today don't just disagree. They need you to be evil. We don't hate people who hurt us. We hate people who make us feel small. 2. Persuasion plus force. People often believe propaganda brought the Nazis to power. Hoffer argues this is simplistic. Hitler combined propaganda with force, and society's frustration prepared the soil. Propaganda alone cannot create a cult-like movement. It requires a population full of frustrated individuals ready to believe. Part 3. 3 roles inside every mass movement. Hoffer says every movement needs 3 types of people. 1. The men of words, the intellectuals and writers who ignite dissatisfaction. 2. The fanatics, the emotional engine that powers the movement. 3. The men of action, practical leaders who organize and solidify the movement. A movement can fail if any category is missing. More than 70 years after its publication, The True Believer is still essential reading. It teaches us fanaticism is not born from ideology, but from personal frustration. Mass movements thrive by offering hope, identity, and belonging. Ordinary individuals can commit extraordinary acts, both good and evil, when absorbed into a crowd. More than 70 years later, nothing has changed. The same frustrated people are still out there. On Reddit, on Twitter, in the comments below lots of videos. Some of them are already looking for a flag to burn their old life under. The only question is, if everything you have tomorrow was suddenly ripped away, how sure are you that you wouldn't be next? Thanks for watching One Day, One Book. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.